Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive with us. Today, we're taking a look at a possible UFO crash in the Sonoran Desert. I'm always just fascinated by stories that take place in these remote and almost mythical landscapes. It kind of adds to the story, and the
Uh,
Sonoran Desert's definitely like that.
Absolutely. It's such a harsh beauty, right?
Yeah.
And such a vastness.
Yeah.
So when you get these reports about a bright light and something metallic descending from the sky and then this explosion,
Yeah.
you can really see why people get their imaginations going.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we have these eyewitness accounts that describe exactly that. People were terrified, awestruck. But I mean, their descriptions, although they're vivid, it does kind of make you wonder, how reliable can eyewitness testimony be in such an extraordinary situation?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the real challenge, right? Human perception.
Yeah.
Especially when you're under stress. It can
Yeah.
be so tricky. We know from studies that memory is very malleable and details can get distorted. And if there's this shared excitement, you can almost get like a collective narrative that might not actually reflect what really happened.
Hmm.
Think about cases like Roswell.
Sure.
The stories kind of evolved over time and they were influenced by media and people's hopes and fears.
Yeah. That's a really good point. It really does make you think, how much does what we want to see actually influence what we believe that we saw?
Mm.
But getting back to the Sonoran Desert, so what happened after the initial reports? Didn't the government get involved? I mean,
Oh, they did, yeah.
yeah.
And very, very quickly and almost completely silently. So you've got military personnel dispatched to the crash site. The media is totally blacked out.
Yeah.
The official words just like, oh, this is a natural phenomenon. Or like, this was just a routine military exercise. Nothing to see here.
Oh, yeah. Classic. I mean, it just doesn't that just make the conspiracy theories even worse?
Oh, for sure.
Makes you wonder what they're really hiding.
Of course. And it's important to say that governments do have legitimate reasons sometimes to be secret,
Mm.
like national security,
Yeah.
preventing panic, right?
Yeah.
But this type of response almost always just backfires because you combine those denials with the witness accounts, and it just creates a vacuum that's quickly filled with speculation and distrust.
Yeah, it definitely leaves you with way more questions than answers. So, if the government wasn't being very helpful, did anybody try to go find evidence themselves? I thought I read something about metallic debris being found near the site.
Yeah, you did. And that's where things get really, really interesting. It's totally understandable that people want to find proof,
Right.
right? They want to validate these amazing claims. But it also makes people very vulnerable to hoaxes, right? And misinterpretations.
Yeah.
Let's say you find what you think is metallic debris. How do you know it's not just something that's always been there?
Right.
But now it's like, oh, this must be from the UFO.
Right.
To actually separate real evidence from wishful thinking requires some serious science. And that's usually missing in these cases.
Yeah. So you're saying even if there was something weird at the site proving that it was from a UFO, that'd be really hard.
Exactly. And it's a good example of why critical thinking is so important. You got to be skeptical. You got to demand evidence. But you also got to understand the limits of that evidence, right?
Yeah.
It's a fine line.
Yeah. So let's change gears for a second. We've talked about the witnesses and the government and finding evidence, but what about the people who lived near this crash site? How did it affect them?
Oh, that's such a key part of this that gets overlooked a lot. You know, these events, whether they're explained or not, can have a huge impact on the community, right?
Mm.
Imagine you're living in this remote area and all of a sudden there's this disruption and rumors going around, this feeling that something is off.
Oh, I'd be freaking out, especially when the government's just so quiet. I mean, that lack of information, I'd be so scared.
Of course. And it really shows how strong belief can be. When something that's unexplained happens, we're just hardwired to try and make sense of it, right?
Right.
We try to make it fit into our view of the world.
Right.
Sometimes that leads to these shared beliefs, and it can be so strong, even without real evidence.
So you've got this event, this big mystery in the desert, and it sparks all these different reactions, right? Fear, curiosity, skepticism, belief. And that leads to all these theories, right?
Right, of course.
Just people trying to explain what they can't understand.
That's human nature. We want explanations. We want patterns. We want to make sense of things we don't know. And a UFO crash in the desert is a perfect place for people to do that.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these theories. We've got the classic, right? The extraterrestrial theory, always a popular one,
Right,
especially with a story like this.
right. That this wasn't just some object. It was a spacecraft. Maybe it was carrying aliens.
Yeah.
This idea is really fueled by those eyewitness accounts, the lights, the metallic object.
Yeah. And then there's that theory that it was a secret government thing that went wrong.
Yeah. Like an experiment.
An experiment, yeah.
This one plays on all the secrecy from the government. They're thinking, well, if they're covering it up this hard, it must be something big, right? Maybe a new plane, a new weapon.
Yeah.
Something they were testing that crashed.
And then, of course, you have the people who believe it was a natural phenomenon, but people just misinterpreted it.
Right. Something explainable.
Yeah.
A meteor. Some weird weather. Space junk falling back to Earth.
Yeah.
All these things can look and sound strange, especially if you're already expecting something crazy.
And we can't forget about the most skeptical take, the hoax. That the whole thing was made up for attention or money or just to mess with people.
Right. It's good to be open to the possibility of a hoax, but you also have to think, okay, why would someone do this? And how would they actually pull it off, especially in such a remote place?
It'd be really hard.
Right.
So lots of different theories, and they each have their strengths and weaknesses. It's like a big puzzle where the pieces don't quite fit.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, right? We don't have a definitive answer, so the mystery lives on.
Absolutely. It really makes us think critically and look at the evidence and just accept that we don't know everything.
And maybe, just maybe, that's why we do these deep dives. It's not really about getting the answer, but it's about the exploring and the questioning and seeing different perspectives.
Yeah.
But we're not done yet. We'll be back to explore this even more, so stay with us as we keep going on this deep dive into the Sonoran Desert UFO Crash.
It's kind of wild how this one event, this alleged crash, has become this, like, cultural touchstone.
Yeah.
People just project so many of their own beliefs and anxieties onto it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, for some folks, it's almost like this symbol of hope, proof that we're not alone, you know? But for others, it's scary, like a reminder that we might not be at the top of the food chain, so to speak.
No. Right, exactly. And then you've got the skeptics who see it as a warning, like, don't jump to conclusions without evidence.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how it reveals so much about us and how we see the world.
And even if we never figure out exactly what happened, I think just the exploring, you know?
Yeah.
Digging into all the details, that's valuable in itself.
Absolutely. It makes us think about these big questions, you know, like perception and evidence and the limits of what we can actually know.
It's humbling, right?
Oh, totally.
Like, even with all our technology, there's still stuff we can't explain easily.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder that we don't have all the answers.
And that's a good thing.
It is.
Yeah, that not knowing, that wonder is what makes us explore and question things.
Right.
If we knew everything, life would be boring.
Yeah, true. Okay, so speaking of exploring, let's get back to those theories about the crash.
Okay.
We talked about aliens and secret government stuff and natural events and hoaxes. Are there any, like, less mainstream explanations out there?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Some get pretty out there, like paranormal and esoteric stuff. Some researchers say it could be connected to, like, interdimensional beings.
Whoa, okay. Interdimensional beings, you mean like from parallel universes?
Exactly. So maybe it wasn't a spaceship like we think of it, but something that popped into our reality from a different dimension. Pretty mind-bending, but it's an idea that's been around for a while.
So how does that explain, you know, the lack of evidence at the site? Like, if something came from another dimension, wouldn't there be something left behind?
That's the tough part. Some people say that maybe these beings or objects operate under different laws of physics. So maybe they wouldn't leave the kind of traces we'd expect.
So basically, we don't really know?
Right. It's all speculation, but still interesting to think about.
Yeah, totally. Are there any other unusual theories we should talk about?
Well, there's one that links this crash to ancient astronaut theories.
Oh, right. Like aliens visiting Earth a long time ago and influencing us.
Exactly. People look at things like the pyramids and say humans couldn't have built that back then.
Right.
So maybe this crash was like a return visit. Maybe they were here before and they left something behind, and this was a mission to get it back.
That's like something straight out of science fiction.
Yeah, kinda. But science fiction can make us think about the edges of what we know, you know.
True.
And sometimes those ideas lead to real discoveries down the road.
Yeah, the line between science fiction and reality can be blurry sometimes, but it's important to remember that these are just theories. We need real proof.
Absolutely. Healthy skepticism is key. Don't jump to conclusions just because you want something to be true.
So we've got all these theories, from the plausible to the really out there. It's like they're telling us more about ourselves than the event itself.
Yeah. It's about our hopes and fears and how we try to make sense of the world.
Exactly. I think that's one of the big takeaways here. It's not just about a UFO crash.
Right.
It's about how we deal with the unknown.
It's that push and pull between wanting answers and being okay with not knowing everything.
It's about the journey, right? Not always the destination.
Mm.
And our journey's taken us to some pretty wild places. But we're not finished yet. There's still more to explore. So stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into the Sonoran Desert UFO crash.
It's amazing, right? How one event like this in the Sonoran Desert can have so many different interpretations.
I know, it's like you said earlier, it's a Rorschach test, kinda.
Yeah.
It shows you what people already believe about the world.
Some people just want to believe in aliens so bad.
Right? They're looking for proof that we're not alone.
And then other people, they're more comfortable sticking with familiar explanations.
Yeah, even if those explanations get a little,
Out there.
Yeah. And some people, they see it as a sign of the times, like all the secrecy and new technology, and it makes them anxious.
It really is like a mirror reflecting all our hopes and fears and stuff.
Exactly. And that's fascinating in itself, don't you think? Even if we never know what really happened, it makes you realize that the truth can be, like, really hard to find.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when it's a mystery like this and everyone's speculating.
We have to look at everything. The witnesses, the reports, and there's so much noise to cut through.
And even then, we might not have all the answers, right?
Right. Sometimes it's better to just accept that we don't know everything.
Which can be hard.
It can.
But it's not always about the answer, right?
Right.
It's about asking the questions and challenging what you think you know.
Exactly. And that can lead you to discover all sorts of things.
Yeah, even if it's not what you were originally looking for.
You might learn more about yourself
Mm-hmm.
or about people in general.
Right. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Sonoran Desert UFO crash,
Yeah.
what are some of the things you hope people listening take away from this?
Well, I hope it makes them a little more curious,
Yeah.
and more willing to question things.
Yeah.
And to appreciate that the truth can be complicated. The world's full of mysteries. And sometimes it's more fun to just enjoy the mystery instead of trying to force an explanation.
That's a good point. And hey, maybe someday there'll be new evidence.
Yeah, you never know.
And it'll shed some light on what happened in the desert. But until then, we get to keep imagining and wondering what it all means.
It reminds us that there's still so much out there that we don't know.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and don't forget to look up at the sky every now and then.
And keep that sense of wonder.
You never know what you might see. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Sonoran Desert UFO crash.